And hello there to our Wyrd Telethon live stream where I interview Joe Compton. He should be logging on in just a minute or two. Primarily know Joe through his work with GoIndieNow, which is it's a multifaceted multimedia platform that he uses to promote independent writers and independent musicians and filmmakers. And I think he's doing some really great work, and I'm going to talk with him about that today. And here he is now.
Hello.
Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Good, Diane. How are you?
I'm great. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, for people who might not be familiar, tell us a little bit about GoIndieNow and what it is that you guys do.
Sure. We're a online network platform that produces shows that highlight, foster, and support indie artists of all art forms. We cover a variety of art forms and mostly film, books, music, but we are looking for anybody who's an artist who's doing it independently to highlight and feature on a. We do shows weekly, monthly, and soon daily. So, and we do them across all of the social media platforms. So those are all designed. Some of them are edited, some of them are live, and that's basically what we do.
That's really cool. I primarily know you, I think, through the, I tend to see it more on the YouTube platform or when it's circulated on Twitter, right? You've helped me out a few times. You've featured stuff that I'm in or my stuff in particular. And thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that we all do.
No problem. I'm happy to do it. Absolutely. That's what it's there for. So I hope that more people take advantage of that opportunity.
So why is it that you feel it's important to concentrate on independent artists and what they're doing and give them a platform?
Well, because I am one myself. I am a published author, which I did independently. I am a filmmaker, which I did independently. And it's not so much the independent thing that matters as much as it is you going out and doing your art, and just to show people that there's a possibility you can make your own dreams happen. You don't have to wait for that golden ticket or that yes, amongst the millions of rejections you might get. You can do it yourself, and there's very easy ways to do that, and people are very successful at it. And so I just gravitated toward the indie community through when I published my book, and that just happened to just permeate through me. I just loved being a part of that community. So I joined, many other communities together and tried to make GoIndieNow. That's what I mean. GoIndieNow was essentially my selfish way of getting all my friends to come together. So like all my filmmaker friends, all my musician friends, all my author friends, all my painter friends, I wanted them all to have one spot that we could all just enjoy each other, because I know so many people in so many other ventures and communities that, have that spirit. And the indie spirit is something that I think is just untouchable.
That's awesome. I know what I like about the indie community is that it tends to be very supportive.
Yeah.
I'm a hybrid, right? So I work a little bit in both fields, and traditional publishing's cool, right? And you get a lot of things out of it that, they give you stuff that you don't get when you're doing it all independently. But I find that it's very much, a lot of it's very you, and that's it. Right? And you're throwing stuff out there. You don't know if anybody's catching it. You're waiting for your royalty check to see if it actually did anything. The indie community is very interactive. of people talk to each other. People are always, you know, let's help, you know, talk about the other people who are doing things that we really enjoy. And I love that. I love that about it.
And ultimately,
I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think I'm not like, oh, you have to be indie all the way or any way, or that's not what I'm about. I'm about building a community and fostering that community. And so if you're a hybrid author, even if you're a traditionally published author, or if you're someone who works in Hollywood, works for somebody big or whatever, there's a place for you here, because we're ultimately, just like you said, we're all independent because we're all doing it for ourselves, and nobody's, there's no platform that I'm aware of that does everything for you. You at some point have to do something for yourself, and you have to, and that typically comes on the marketing side of things, or even sometimes you have to find certain things to go with the publisher or help the publisher out or whatever. But I mean, a lot of times now, even publishers are asking you ahead of time, do you have a social media following? They're looking at that as much as they're looking at anything else. So, you'll ultimately have to be independent at some point, some way. And so let's celebrate that part of you. I don't have any problem with anybody wanting to be traditionally published or wanting to, make their movie in Hollywood. All those things are nice. They have certain elements to them that are great, but it doesn't have to be where you're waiting for that to happen, is all I'm saying. You can do it without that. And that's what my show focuses on.
I can, my own experience kind of confirms yours with that, right? My first traditional publishing contract, they, when I sent the query and whatnot, they're like, what are all your social media platforms, right? Yeah, it was, and of course they didn't pay for my book tour. I paid for my book tour.
Right.
Right? So I get you. Yeah, it's true. You do have to do more and more your own marketing yourself these days.
And people don't understand the word advance, but books are giving you an advance, but it's like a loan. They're betting on you against the marketplace. And basically, if you don't fulfill that, then you will have to find another way to do it yourself. So, I mean, there's a lot of misnomers about being traditional in many senses. And so I want to help those people as well, because those people have nowhere else to go. And so that's what the indie spirit's all about. It's not about, hey, I'm indie, I'm going to fly the indie flag. I'm all for that as well, but I'm also all for that we're all one. I live in America, and I know not everybody I talk to or is watching lives in America, but we're such a divided, diversive group right now, and there's enough of that in the world going on. Let's find a place where we can all find common ground and be together, And why not in the artist field? We're all artists ultimately, and that's what we are, and we represent ourselves as. So why not all come together?
I think that's exactly the right way to do it, personally. I absolutely agree with you. I believe in that. Okay, so do you find, right, because this is something I've run into, right? I tell people, and I think it's weird, right? Because I wouldn't do this, right? I would not do this, but I get this a lot, right? Okay, so my first book was a nonfiction book. This is the one that was traditionally published with a medium-sized press. It's not a large press, but it's not a small press, right? Okay, so then I started, now I'm going to do my fiction career, right? And I found, first of all, I found that my experience in nonfiction counted for jack shit. Right. In the fiction field, they're like, yeah, we don't care. You've already published a book. Right. And I also found that, I keep running. I went to my local library and I'm saying, I'm going to do I have a book release coming out. And they're like, self-published, Like, do you find that people have this perception that the reason why people go indie is because they couldn't get publishers to pay attention to them, that it's not very good? Do you run into that prejudice? Because I tend to run into it.
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. I actually, when I was putting out my book, I was in Portland doing a book festival, and I walked into Powell Books and talked to them, a supposed indie bookstore, and talked to them, and they wouldn't even talk to me about putting my book in there because they go through distributing channels and different channels and whatnot. And while they were understanding about where I was, they don't cater to that. They want a mass market because their business, it's a business, so they're trying to sell their books. So I understood that, but I do run into the prejudice quite a bit and the misnomer. But it's funny because like that's with a lot of businesses and places like that, but people tend to not have that. It's starting to wane a lot, Probably about 5 or 10 years ago, it was more prevalent for people to throw their nose at, oh, you're a self-published author. But now it's more prevalent and people don't really care. As long as they're getting good content, they don't care how it comes to them or why or how you created it. That's the thing I'm finding. And so if you concentrate on the reader and not the businesses, the businesses are going to help you. But there's still that perception. And I think those businesses are holding a grudge that I think is kind of self-induced in a certain way, but also is kind of, I can see where they're coming from because it was such a dishonest turn and a terrible way in which to get your foot in the door at one point. But our world is changing, and that's, other traditionally published, really huge names have self-published now. And have put out their own films and are producing their own content. The music industry completely imploded and is now everything is pretty much self. The major labels don't have the clout that they once had, and so we're seeing that kind of permeate within the indie publishing world, but it's not there yet because there are still those catalysts of those big five that are holding on to the last bastion of hope that they can run us all out of here.
Right. It's funny, right? There was a report, I don't know, this has been circulating the past couple of weeks among a lot of the science fiction and fantasy writers, indie writers that I know, right? Where they caught on to a guy named Data Guy put out this report about the science fiction and fantasy market share, right? And for anybody who's interested, by the way, you can watch that on it's the beginning of the archive of the live stream of the SIFWA Nebula Awards for this year. All you have to do is type in Nebula Awards in YouTube and it should be the first thing that comes up, right? And there's timestamps in the description, right? We broadcast that. I was involved with that. I'm the manager of the SIFWA YouTube channel right now. But he did this report and it really, I really kind of just changed my whole perception completely, right? Because I've always kind of for a long time, I believed this myth of the gatekeepers, that they were needed to decide what was good fiction, right? Then I got involved in the community, right? And in both aspects of publishing, right? And I learned that what they're looking for is not good books. They're looking for a marketable product. Right? Or what they think is a marketable product, which is based on their years of analysis and not even scientific analysis. A lot of it is personal gnosis, right? About what will sell and what won't in the market. And so they're less likely to take risks on innovations. They don't have a lot of room for odd sizes, like they don't like novelettes and novellas, and, they don't give female writers as much press time as they do male writers. And okay, so Data Guy did this report, right? And he actually investigated, okay, what's going on? Because all the big publishers, they say that sales of science fiction and fantasy have been doing this, right? Okay. So then he found, in the meantime, independently published science fiction and fantasy has been doing this, right? I wonder if there's a correlation there, right? So right now, yeah, exactly, right? So 48% of the total science fiction fantasy market share is now occupied by independents and independent collectives, right? And we make about as much money on average as the traditionally published writers in the same field. So you can see that it's changing. Now, did you hear about this, or is this the first time that you've heard about it? And what do you think about this?
Well, this particular study I haven't heard about, or this company that put this together. But this is very much the trend I'm seeing in many articles. You can go to Publishers Weekly, and at least once a month they publish something about how the indie community upticked. Just recently, the ebook marketplace has basically just ate itself because the indie publishing community took it upon itself to price the marketplace down. And so traditional publishers are really not focused on the ebook marketing anymore because they're losing money by focusing in that direction. So things like this, like the romance, I know in the romance category, there's a lot of uptick with independents as well. And a lot of divisions are shutting down within traditional publishing houses because they can't compete with the indie marketplace. So that's very common to what I've been hearing and seeing in many other genres. And I think with science fiction and fantasy too, I think that particular reasoning, the reason it's going up, is because of what you said earlier, which is they had this personal stigma or this idea that you can't. We're going to publish the 10 best authors that we know, and we're going to stick with what we know and never bring anybody new in, and that caused a rift because they ignored science fiction and fantasy for so long, and in doing that, there's got to be some place where somebody has to publish something, right? So that's why the uptick is because all these fantasy and science fiction authors are building their case to be traditionally published by first being independently published. And so that's what they're doing. And a lot of smaller presses are popping up too. That's another reason why this is going on, is because small presses have taken it upon themselves to jumpstart the marketplace too. And a lot of these small presses concentrate, because they are probably authors themselves, concentrate on the genre that they're authoring. So science fiction and fantasy is one of those genres that is so multifaceted and so large and it has so many subgenres that people are looking at that and going, hey, I can make some money actually publishing that specific genre. And that is smart business, but it is also dumb business on the part of the traditional houses, because they're not focusing on, they're holding on to a grudge that has no merit anymore.
I think you're right. And I think it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle.
Yep.
Because, like they said, seriously, watch this report if you haven't seen it already, because I went, wow, right? Like, he was saying that, they keep saying, oh, the science fiction and fantasy market is really bad right now. People don't want science fiction and fantasy books. So less and less new voices with less and less innovation are being given the backing of a traditional publishing house, which is perpetuating the migration to independent publishing, right? And there's a lot of crossover. Fortunately, though, there is good news. According to Data Guy, when you consider both of these aspects of the market is booming.
Yeah.
Right? There has been a huge uptick in sales in science fiction and fantasy if you're looking at all of it. So by both aspects being part of the market, it's benefiting the reader, especially because there's so many more options, and writers are having more options for ability to make money. Now, okay, I think that we could do some work on that, but that's another topic. Where was I going with this? Okay, yes, the everybody's growing, right? Everybody's growing together because it's creating more of a market. But I hear a lot of people say, oh, where did all those silhouette romances go? You know, I used to really like those, right? And where did all the little DAW paperbacks go for the science fiction fantasy people? The answer is they went to ebooks, right? That's where they are. And there's a huge independent romance market. It's enormous. There's so many people, and there's dedicated fans who will eagerly await anything that certain authors have coming out. Some of my friends have been very successful in this department, and good for them. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think, oh no, sorry, yeah, go ahead. Was there something else you wanted to say with that? I tend to babble. So
No. I totally agree with you on everything you were saying. Absolutely. I just think it's inevitable when a group of people, it's when groups of people get together and they start to form groups and push forward, it's inevitable that they're going to push through the wall. I mean, it's just a force of nature. It's part of, you know, being who we are, and we're not. And there's a group of people who are determined, and there's a ton of people who, you know, don't look at it the way that other people look at it, and those people are the innovators and they're the ones pushing forward, and that's what we're all about in featuring those folks, because that's important. I think that's how the world changes and how the perception changes.
Absolutely, I agree with you completely. And what you're saying, you said earlier that people are finding that, you know, well-known, traditionally published authors are also publishing independently right now. I find that there is a lot of crossover happening in that kind of area. Perhaps they, you know, had something they wanted to publish that their traditional publisher didn't think fit their label or whatever, so they didn't want to publish it. So they're like, okay, well, I'm going to publish it, and, you know, independently. And, you know, some people want to write multiple genres. The traditional publishing market does not lend itself well to that, right? You tend to get assigned a brand depending on what you first put out, and when you do stuff that's outside of the brand, people go, what? And they don't know how to market you, right?
Yeah.
So there are many reasons why someone might choose to publish independently, right? Even if you've written the Pulitzer Prize winning novel of the century, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you find is the most difficult about getting the word out? Like, do you find that it tends to be hard? And, you know, what are ways that you found around that? Because you've been around a long time. I've heard of you from way back before we even started interacting. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a big question.
Yeah, no. The difficult challenges is being in a marketplace that has millions and millions of people. I mean, that challenge is, how do you stand out amongst millions of people? What are you doing differently that would gravitate people toward you? And that's always been the biggest challenge. And you know, YouTube, you know, has so many people, and only so many people, you know, they have a market share of a lot of people who make money, and there's a lot of things that people do there, and it's a big giant community. YouTube is the biggest social media network on the planet, and it's just because there's so many people doing so many things, and so many people are copying what other people are doing to try and be successful, and that's the way of the world, and that's how things go. But one thing that I'm doing that I think is standing out and helping me stand out is diversifying. I don't just depend on YouTube. You know, there was a time when YouTube was it. YouTube was the thing, and I stood there and I tried to put all my effort into YouTube. But I was finding that not all of my friends venture to YouTube. Some of them are on Twitter, some of them are on Facebook, some of them are on Instagram, and Instagram's becoming a really big one. So in order to capture everybody that I know in the marketplaces. Again, my whole agenda is to bring everybody together. So to do so, you have to reach out to them where they populate. You know, there's people who I know who are very much about Twitter. I know people who stay away from Twitter. I know people who are on Facebook. I know people who hate Facebook. So I have to cater to every single person that I know and diversify. And so I do things on Facebook that I don't do anywhere else. I do things on Instagram that I don't do anywhere else. And then I spread that out throughout the entirety of all my platforms so everybody gets a taste of it. But I'm exclusive to you, Facebook, with my show This Week in Indies. That's a show that I do on Facebook. That show is on Facebook, and that's where it is. I am exclusively do my flagship show, the monthly show that I do every month, which in fact will have a new episode this Saturday. That show is on YouTube. It's been on YouTube since the start. And so, and then I do things on Twitter that I don't do anywhere else, and Instagram. But ultimately, I make sure that I sprinkle everything around. But I think that's the key, is diversifying. I think that you have to, if you're trying to make it in this marketplace, and it's all luck. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, you know, I've been fortunate enough to have so many great people, and those people have been so complimentary of what we do, and they've, you know, people like yourself and people out there. So that's the luck that I, you know, and yeah, opportunity creates luck. I do believe that, but I also believe that, you know, if you're just in the right place at the right time, that happens. You know, I do a lot of work on analytics. I'm a big numbers guy, and I believe the numbers never lie. And so I look at all the numbers, and I look at, you know, I've tried to do shows here on this time frame in this juncture on this medium, and I look at all that and I study all that, and that's what I do as well. So those are the things that I do to try and put myself out there. But, you know, hey, look, sometimes also, and I think this is the thing that people have held most people back, is you have to prepare yourself to know that you're going to spend some money if you're going to put yourself out there. You have to. There's plenty of things that are free. There's a lot of great ways to do your marketing and be who you are and put yourself out there free. That's great. But you have to also be prepared. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. I don't spend a lot of money to put myself out there. But I do spend money. And that's going outside of the box, not going to places that normally people wouldn't go to, and think of those things. And that's where I have concentrated on in my marketing plan, and then making sure that everybody who's aboard now I keep them all happy and do what they want me to do. And I listen to my audience. That's another key thing. Listen to your readership, listen to your audience, listen to the people that are supporting you. They're the ones that are watching. They're the ones that are giving you everything that you have. So, help yourself by listening to what they're saying. Don't think you've got the right answer, because when you do, then it turns around and it becomes the wrong answer. So those are all the things that I do, but that's the biggest challenge. I mean, if you look on Amazon and you're a new author and your book gets published and the first day it gets published, you're at 200,000 in your author ranking. And then the next day, 3 days later, you look and you're at 4 million and you go, what the hell just happened? Why did I drop so much? You have to understand that there's 4 million people publishing on the same day that you're publishing, and it's just going to work out that way. And sometimes it's then at that point do you go, it's not so much that it happens to you, because it happens to everybody, but it's what you do with that information that matters and how you deal with that. Okay, so I was 200,000 the first day, but 4 million the second day. How do I get back to that 200,000? What are some things I can do to do that? And that's what I look at. That's how I approach it, and if you approach it that way, I think you'll be very successful.
That's really good advice. Thank you. I have 2 lines of questioning that come out of what you just said.
Okay.
Right. The first one is, what are things that you recommend? You have a lot of experience in this field. What are things that you recommend to people? Where should they wisely spend their money to get their name out there?
Again, I think it's I do a lot of sponsored posting on Facebook, Instagram. Those are really cheap. Those are, you can do for $5. You can put your whatever post you want to boost it. You can boost your post, and for $5, and you have to be concentrated with that. It's not, you can't just, don't just put $5 in there and go, okay, Facebook, do your magic, send it to all your 100 million people. No, that's not how that works. Marketing is a strategy. You have to decide where your audience is and who your audience is, and cater that boost toward that audience. You know, I don't go to, hey, single moms. My boosted posts don't go out to single moms, because, you know, that's not to say that single moms don't watch my show, but my show's not about single moms. I don't have anything about single moms on my show. Why would I boost it to single moms? I boost it to people who like books, book lovers, and things like that. So, and you can spend $5. You can, you set yourself a budget for the month and spend that, and boost more than one post, and do it staggered. You know, that's a great way to start if you're starting there. Spend some money on if you're a published author, spend some money on a book tour. Book tours are relatively cheap, and they tend to spread out amongst several outlets, not just blogs, but you'll get a review out of that. Usually you'll get an interview or two out of that, and people do different things on different blogs. And so find a diversified blog tour. Those are relatively inexpensive to do as well. Some of them are a little bit more expensive than others, but do your research. There are cheaper ones out there. Another thing to do is find things that are you're common with. So you're a sci-fi author. There are sci-fi magazines out there. Put your book, they have advertising rates. And a lot of these magazines have circulations of 100,000 people, and they're small magazines. Like, if you're not a sci-fi person, you probably have never heard of sci-fi magazine, but he has a circulation of 100,000 people. And if you're a sci-fi writer, you should be advertising there. You should be involved with what they're doing. You know, ask if you can be interviewed. Ask if you can get your book reviewed. All of those things, and be a part of that marketing, because old school marketing still exists, and they work, and there's a reason. And if you got to look at what is getting the most eyes on your product, and that's where I would spend my money. You know, find a place that has something that is your common interest, you know, with what you're doing, what you're presenting. You know, I wrote a crime thriller, and I happen to know, I read this book about how in Germany, crime thrillers are really, really popular, you know, and they don't care if it's written in English or German. Actually, I found out that they do care. But when I read that, I was like, okay, cool. So I did some German marketing. I went and found a TV station and asked them if I could, you know, advertise on their show. If I could, I found a German magazine that features books, and I asked if I could put an advertisement in their magazine. And those cost me a little bit more money, but because of just the exchange rate and whatnot. But that boosted my sales almost immediately. I mean, and so it paid for itself. Another really, really important thing I think that a lot of authors don't do, especially first-time authors, is they don't look at local festivals, local book festivals. I didn't make any money. I've never been a profitable author on just Amazon. I've been a profitable author because I went to book festivals, and those make up their money quickly, you know, and they're cheap. You can, if they're a local book festival, they're usually, you can get a table for $50, and some of them require you to have a table. Well, buy a table for $20. There's cheap folding tables you buy for $20. Get yourself a nice cloth. Invest in your marketing too. Invest in bookmarks. Invest in swag for yourself. Things that have your brand on them. Get a brand out there and keep with your branding. And in doing all that, that's where you become successful.
That is awesome. So I really hope that any other independent writers who are checking this out, or even traditionally published writers, would pay attention to that section, because I learned a few things in there, and now I know how I'm going to apply my marketing budget more effectively, saying this Kickstarter goes well, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's cool. I mean, I do have a small marketing budget that I included in the stuff that I was asking for, because you're right. I know I've been here long enough now to learn that if you do not throw money at the problem, then you are not going to get anywhere. And that is a fact, right? And that is part of the reason why we have crowdfunding.
And I think,
and hey, you know what, oh no, go ahead.
Well, I think throwing money at the problem is one thing, but throwing it effectively is the other thing. And that's the thing that matters. That's the difference. So putting your money behind what works for you, and not everything I do is going to work for you. But you can tailor something that I do that will maybe effectively work for you in a different way. And that's, I mean, obviously don't go to Germany if you're writing romance novels, they have a crime thriller. They like crime thrillers. They like dark stuff. So if you're writing fluffy romance novels, of course, you're not going to do well in Germany. Look for the marketplace that does well. And that's pretty much probably the United States and Canada. But, doing that, you have to do your own research and you find your own spots. But putting your money where that is, that's what I'm suggesting.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you. That was very useful. There was a lot of information, and I'm trying to remember what I was going to ask you from the previous conversation as well. Out of that, you were talking about, let's see if I remember, before that, which was great, and I really appreciate it. We were talking about ways you have to put money into it, and it's important to put money in the right places. But you were talking about something else in that too, prior to that I wanted to follow. I should have made a note, but okay. I guess I'm gonna have to leave it and come back to that, but that's fine.
It'll come back to you.
It will. It'll probably at 3:00 in the morning when I get up to pee, but it will. That's all right. That's cool. While I'm thinking about it, we had a question that was lurking here from before, and I'm putting it up on the screen. Nice. So George asks, what are some of your highest and lowest points as an author and with GoIndieNow? What challenges surprised you? And what are the milestones you are most proud of so far? And I assume because he mentioned and with GoIndieNow that's specifically addressed to you. So.
Well, as far as the author thing goes, I've had the lowest of lows. I've told the story 100 times, but I'll tell it here as well. I was actually going to be a traditionally published author, and I had a deal in place. I had an agent, and we went to New York, and we sat in the conference room, and we had a contract in front of us, and everything that you could possibly actually dream of was happening, but it was going the wrong direction. And so I walked away from the deal, and I was then, because I did that, and, right or wrong, and there are some wrong that I did as well that I applied to myself in that situation. I was young, but that's not an excuse that, this was a dream and I was trying to fulfill it, and I didn't look at it correctly and I didn't handle it correctly. But for that, I was touted by this publishing company as being difficult to work with. And luckily, we would have never known this. We would have just kept going and trying to get into other places. But a friend of a friend who worked at one of the publishing houses we were soliciting was a friend of my agent, and she sent the email that this guy sent to everybody, which was he basically blacklisted me from being traditionally published. So my book didn't get published for 15 years after that, because at that time when I was out there, the only route you had was traditional publishing. If you were going to do a vanity press, that's where all this stigma and terribleness comes from, is that word vanity press. And if you were going to do that, then you were, somebody who wasn't considered a legitimate author at that point. So there was no such thing as self-publishing. So, I mean, it existed, but it was dark and horrible. So that's the lowest of lows for me. I walked away. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I felt like that was my one opportunity, and it wasn't an opportunity that I really wanted to have, but I walked away from it. And in doing so, I walked away from any chance I had from being published, I thought. And so I completely just walked away from the entirety of that medium and that art form, and didn't do anything for 15 years with it. So that was the lowest of lows. The highest of highs is, of course, publishing then, and coming back to a marketplace, and then a place that was so embracing and so warm and loving for me that I was able to do it. And I was so supported, and I couldn't believe that. And so when that happened, that's what GoIndieNow was birthed from. So that was the highest of highs for me in both aspects, because that's how this all came about for me. So I have to say that's the moment, and as far as the lowest of lows for GoIndieNow, there's a lot of things that have happened that I don't share with people about whether or not and certain guests didn't want to be on my show, or certain things didn't want to happen, or this or that. But I don't concentrate on any of that, because look, this is not, I don't make any money doing GoIndieNow. I'm not, it's not something that is something that I do for a living. It's something I do it's not a hobby. It's something that I do very seriously and take very seriously. And I put a lot of effort and time into it, and it's out there. And, maybe someday we'll have our own network or whatever, but all those things are going to be down the road. And so I'm just concentrating on putting out what I can do. And that's what I control and love. I don't worry about the negative stuff, because you learn very quickly as an artist to develop a thick skin or be run over, and I won't be run over. So none of that bothers me. So the lowest of lows is there's never a time when I feel there's a lowest of lows. This has all been just fantastic for me, and I'm very proud of it, and very happy to do it, and very happy to put it out there. So the highest of highs, though, is that we're starting to do more things, and more people are being involved in that. And I think that's really awesome. So the milestone I'm really proud of is being able to go out in the world. When I got the first opportunity to cover a film festival here locally, that changed everything for me. And so now I'm out and about. I'm going to Canada here in a week and a half to cover.
I know. I saw that. I almost went to that conference, but it was like really tight deadline, and I wasn't sure. I would have had to try to present something, and I wasn't sure I could get it ready in time. Next year, though. Nice. Hopefully you come back next year.
Yeah,
but I saw you were on the schedule, so that's cool.
Yeah, and I went to Park City, Utah in January and covered the Slam Dance Film Festival, which I covered as one of the best film festivals out there. And so I got those opportunities have all come because, I'm putting myself out there and doing what I'm doing, but that's the milestone. And to be able to do all of that and constantly do that and only do, I still want to be an artist and create. And I'm trying to put out a second book right now, but, and then I have plans to make films in the future as well. I'm going to get back into that as well. But, to do that and to do GoIndieNow, and that's all I do with my life, would be the greatest thing ever I could imagine. And that would be the ultimate milestone and the ultimate highest of highs. But that'll come, and I'm patient. And well, actually, my wife will tell you I'm not patient, but I'm willing to accept that this takes time. So And we'll just keep growing and doing what we're doing in the meantime, and put out better stuff and get better at it. And that's the cool thing is, one of the coolest thing for me is that people stuck with me, even when I look at that first show that I ever did and I cringe, and now, and production values have gone up, things have, we've tightened things up, we've expanded things, and all those things are all part of the growing pains and the lessons you learn as you do this. And so I'm just so appreciative of people for sticking with me and staying with me through all that. And so, I make it a personal mission to put out the best show I can for them. So that's what I concentrate on. I hope I answered the question.
That is awesome. I think you did. I think you covered everything that was asked there. That's so cool. I find that readers will never be angry about you recommending somebody else to them who's doing similar to what you do. If they like what you did, readers read, right? And they read lots. I'm one of these people. I have this, got 3 books given time, and it never stops, right? So I'm always looking for something else. They'll never get angry at you. So it's not a competition, right? It's not about who does it the best, right? And art is also subjective. I've read, I've read stuff that, really famous, well-known, and writers have put out there, and I've gone, yeah, this is crap, and I've read stuff by, okay, granted, I was reading them anyway, right? And in a lot of cases, it's not even necessarily, example, Philip K. Dick, he's a big, right? Sometimes his stuff is great. Sometimes his stuff is crap, in my opinion. Sorry. Just that, right. That's everybody, right? We're all like that. And so just, and sometimes I'll read this quietly published little independent book, it's got 2 reviews on Amazon, and I'll get it because it's, free for a day, or it's on a 99-cent sale. And I'll be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have to get everything this author ever did, So, and readers will never, they'll never complain, right? They'll never complain that you pointed them to someone else. So there's no reason not to be about, let's do this together. It's a good thing, and it does us no harm.
Well, on the competition, subject, for me, I don't look at it that way either, because I think there's just so much room for all of us to be where we are, and we're all different. We're all unique snowflakes, and so we may do the same thing or have the same subject matter or whatever, but we can support one another, because your audience becomes my audience, becomes all of our audience, and it just spreads the wealth. It doesn't stop. Like, my audience doesn't leave me and come to you. We meld together and we become a bigger audience. And that's why you're seeing the uptick you are in the publishing world, because, this guy told this guy, hey, I made this money on selling my book this way. And, let me try that. And it just goes up and up and up. And that's how it works. And that's the competition thing is one thing. Yeah, I can brag that, hey, my book sold more than your book or whatever, but that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any value when it comes to building an audience and building a brand and being together as a community. It doesn't do anything for that. So there's something to be said for fellowship in that respect.
That's cool. And I agree. I learn stuff from people all the time. And occasionally I have the opportunity to pass on information to other people. Nothing makes me happier than encouraging a nascent writer to write and to put their and to get it, where they start going, oh, I'm starting to do this and I'm starting to get sales. And, I mean, that's just, I just feel with such joy. I'm like, yes, I understand how you feel. It's so good to be, out there doing this. How many more people can I make happy like this? And I see that you feel the same way, and I think that is really cool. And it's clear in the work you do, right? Because I watch your show, not all the time, but most of the time. And, there's a lot of love there, right? You really, you focus on people, and, you support a lot of nonprofit and charitable causes. And, you're working with other people to make it more interesting. And, I see it, right? I can see it every time there's something new. And that's really cool. Do you find, let's see, I don't know, do you find that there's more struggling artists in this field than there are successful? Well, of course there are, but do you have opportunity frequently or infrequently to see people, just start out, but then grow into, a more well-known sort of platform as a writer? I don't know if that makes sense.
I understand what you're saying, I think. Well, I think what's cool, what I'm seeing the trend being right now is that there's a lot of people sitting back and taking their time to put their stuff out there because they're absorbing and learning from what everybody else's mistakes are and everybody else is doing. And those people are getting instant gratification and success because they did it that smart way. I mean, for myself, I just jumped right in and hoped that I could swim. But, I think there are a lot because not everybody could be successful. But success is defined differently for other people. So, maybe your success is that you got a hard copy and you can smell and touch your book, oh, that's my success. I've just been successful there, so it's maybe not about the money. It's maybe not about being full-time. Maybe it's just something you do on the side. Maybe it's, or success might be, hey, I just grew my Twitter followers to 1,000 people. Whatever, however you define success, there's avenues to find it. And I think there are struggling artists out there who put themselves out there who are thinking, that do jump in the pool and think they can swim in the deep end right away. And you have to learn how to go from the shallow end to the deep end, and you have to learn how to properly breathe underwater. And it's very much like that. And so, and there you either learn by trial by fire, or you learn, making mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. I think people are so afraid to make mistakes, and I think that's the wrong approach. Make as many mistakes as you can. That's the only way you're going to learn. And as the great Yoda once said, there is no try, there's only do. Just do it. Don't, if you don't, then you'll always regret that you didn't. And why have regrets? Life is too short to have regrets. So go out there and do it. And if you fail, you fail. But, maybe there's a way you could learn from that. And maybe failure can ultimately turn to success. So, and I think there's a lot of instant gratification in our society as well. And I don't think that exists for the majority of people either. So people have to be willing to accept that that's not going to happen. And when you do that, when you accept that, then you find the little, we just did a live panel on setting goals, and that's important. Set a goal that's realistic and keep climbing that ladder till you get to the top. And then you'll know, then you'll know what ultimate success is, because you followed the smart way. You didn't just jump in and drown, so that's how I look at it.
So much in what you said there. So much in what you said there. That's so cool. Yeah. Sorry, I thought I heard an echo. But yeah. Okay. So yeah. I agree with you completely. Right. I've been known to speak publicly about that kind of thing before. People who've been following me on my blogs and whatnot, they know that I say all the time, just do it. Just try it. right? You know, I had one of those epiphany moments. My husband was almost killed in a horrible car accident. That was 10 years ago now, right? And I went, what am I doing with my life? Right? What am I doing with my life? I'm working this bullshit job. I hate it. You know, I'm barely making rent. Why do I want to keep doing this? This is not what I want to do. Right. So then that started me on the path. I hadn't written since high school, you know, and I started, I was thinking about that, the question, you know, what was your lowest point as a writer? Mine was when I gave up, which was after a lot of discouragement in school and graduating in the recession where I was working, you know, less than minimum wage jobs to stay alive because that's what there was, right? I kind of went, yeah, I don't have time for writing in the real world. That was the lowest point, right? None of the stuff that's happened after, not one rejection, nothing since then has been as bad as that, right? So I guess for me, in part, success is about keeping writing, right? But yeah, I had that epiphany moment and I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it because screw this, because, you know, we could all die right now. I could walk out the street and get hit by a bus. It was something like that. It was just totally out of the blue, right? And I was like, no, you know, I'm going to do something before I die. So, and I've lived my life that way ever since. And I got to tell you, I've had some spectacular failures, but I have also had some spectacular successes. So it's definitely worth it, in my opinion. If fear of making a mistake is the thing that's stopping you, don't let it. You know, because nobody's gonna go on their deathbed and go, oh, I wish I'd worked more at the office. You know, they're gonna say, I wish I'd written that book. I wish that I'd, you know, spent more time with my family. I wish I'd pursued my dreams more. Right. So absolutely, I'm totally there. By the way, to our viewers, you can ask questions if you want to. There is a chat function, and there's also a Q&A function, right? If you put it in the Q&A, I think I can put it up on the screen like I did with the last one. And if you do the chat function, then I can just read it if you prefer. So feel free to ask questions and make comments. And while I'm waiting for that, where do you see indie publishing and indie, you know, like the indie market in general going in the next few years? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think it's going to get bigger and bigger, for sure. I think that you'll see little hybrids of like small presses start to pop up, and those things will start to become more prevalent as the music industry has kind of given us the pathway to how this goes, how you know, this is. I don't know that there will ever be a super implosion like there was in the music industry and the publishing industry, because the big five are just so dominant and strong still, and they'll always have that. But the one thing that we have that the big five doesn't have, even in hybrid and small presses, is the innovation to think outside the box. The big five refuse to do that. They refuse to adapt. You're going to adapt to them, or you're going to, you know, you're going to be crushed. That's how I've always approached it. That's the market that they've always laid out. And hence why there will always be a stigma about self-publishing as well. But that all, I think, will come to a head if they don't adapt. And they've subtly adapted and they've done certain things, but they have such a dominant share. I don't think they'll go away. But I do think that we'll see more indie self-published authors, but we'll also see more of them go more traditional in a hybrid way or a small press way, just because ultimately there is some value and benefit in that. And I think those little ones will start to pop up, and little ones will start to join and become conglomerates of bigger ones. And thus you'll see that happen. I think that's the immediate future. I think down the road, who knows? I mean, who knows where technology is leading us? I mean, audiobooks are starting to really balloon in the market share. And so when that happens, there's more technologies out there, more opportunities. And so I think that is going to become bigger and bigger as well. And how we learn and who we are as people will change and dictate the publishing industry as well.
I think we're beginning to see the start of that already, right? Like, again, bringing it back to that whole data guy report, right? As far as the traditional publishing houses are concerned, science fiction and fantasy is on the decline, right? So they keep saying that, and they keep publishing less and less science fiction and fantasy. And then the bookstores, right, put the science fiction and fantasy in darker, more spiderweb infested corners in the back of the store, right? And it's inconsistent, because if you look through the YA section, which is enormous, right, it's all dystopia, it's all fantasy. So how can you say, right? But they really believe this, right? Because they're just not taking the independent market into account. And, they're doing what corporations do, which is sticking with a tried and true business strategy that has always worked for them, right? They're risk adverse as a result. So yes, more and more people are finding their way into independent publishing, and the migration's probably going to continue. Science fiction and fantasy readers are often not going to the big chain stores anymore, right? They know that they're not going to find anything worth looking at there. They're going to find an entire shelf of Star Wars books and an entire shelf of Warhammer books. And then they're going to find the science fiction and the fantasy all melded together in one single place in the back of the store, half of which they bought 20 years ago because it's all Heinlein and Philip K. Dick, which is fine. I love that stuff. But, to find the new stuff that's out there, right? Like, more and more people, science fiction and fantasy readers, are more and more going to the used bookstores, the independent bookstores, and the internet, because that is where they're going to find more selection. And thus, they hurt their own market share by being risk adverse, right? So I hope that trend will turn around a bit. I hope that people will begin to see that, because I believe that if the traditional companies put more effort into expanding new talent, that would be better for everybody all around. It would open up newer markets for everyone, right? So I hope that they do that. But in the meantime, some things are going to be done independently, right? The reason why Once Upon a Time in the Wyrd West is an independent publication is because the first story in it, Showdown, was my first venture into independent publishing, which was only a year and a half ago, right? So I did like you did, Joe. I jumped in and I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn to swim, right? And I'll drown, but if I don't, so I better learn, right? So that's what I did. And I've learned a lot in that time. Right. And one thing that I learned, the reason why I went with independent publishing is because it was a novelette. It was 8,800 words. And it's also a blend of science fiction and fantasy. And it's also a blend of fantasy and Western, and try to sell that to a magazine. Right. Good luck, because it's not going to happen, because they don't want to put in. The novelettes are big, right? They're all publishing flash fiction these days, right? They don't have the room for short stories. And even they're all crowdfunding the magazines too, in about 95% of the cases that I'm aware of, right? Even big people like Locus operate by crowdfunding. That's how they operate, right? So, right. So and so they want to give that space to people that, are the hot topics right now. Right. And I understand that. Right. So, good luck getting attention with that. Right. And then, this is so weird. Like, I actually I got a rejection recently from a big name fantasy magazine that I'm not going to name, but it was a different story. They were reading it, like, this is my example of how this works, right? And they sent back the thing going, oh yes, if it has space stations, it's too futuristic for us. And I'm like, did you read the next page where I told you all the ships were operated by magic and they have sails? You know, no, they didn't, right? They don't have time. They don't have time for that. They've got time to read one page and decide if they're going to make the story on, right? So I got frustrated with it, right? And I thought, well, screw it. You know, lots of people are independent publishing. I'm going to give it a try, and this will probably work well as a serial anyway, right? So that's what I did. And then over the next year, I published 6 stories, and now I'm putting them all together in one book. And printing it was always part of the plan, but of course you're not going to get it traditionally published if it's been out there on the internet, unless you've somehow gathered a magic huge audience like The Martian, right? Or Wool. Those are some success stories that went like that. But you know, it's already a reprint, so now nobody wants it, right? So I got to do it myself. But hey, that's okay, because that means I get to do it my way, right? Yeah. So before we go here, we've been at this about an hour, right? Okay, so you're going to a conference and you know what? I remember the name of like 3 different conferences in Canada that were coming up, and I don't remember which one was the one that you were going to be
When
at.
Words Collide in Calgary.
That's right. I thought so. Okay, I was making sure that I had it right, because but yes, when words collide. Yeah, that looked great. I just missed the deadline to go. I was like, but next year I'll go. So, and what else do you have coming up in the near future that the audience might be interested in, and where can they find you?
So we have our flagship show, which is Time to Go Indie Now. That's a monthly show that we do at the end of every month. That actually will post on Saturday. That's our next posted show. That's on our YouTube channel. If you search Go Indie Now, all one word, in the search button, you'll find us. We're the first thing that pops up in the search. So that's the channel name, and just like, subscribe, and comment on everything we do there. We love that. But we have that going on. And then, like I said, I'll be at When Words Collide, and we'll actually be doing our live panel show from there on the Friday night that I'm there. So we do a live panel show on our we do our live panel. Nice. We do our live panel show once a month on YouTube, and it's totally live, and everybody can interact. And that will happen on the August 10th, Friday, August 10th, and that's we'll be live from Calgary doing that, and it'll be the first time we've ever had like everybody in one screen, which will be very interesting. But that happens once a month. And then I have a brand new show that we're posting in August that we'll start posting monthly, and that's called Fandom Forum, where we gather a bunch of people who are fans of a certain thing, like a certain book series or a movie, and we just dissect it and talk about it and share why we're fans of this, and hopefully that'll bring more eyeballs to that particular artist and what they're doing. So we have that show coming out. That's the middle of August. And then I'm really excited because in the middle of August, when I come back from Calgary and I have another film festival I'm going to be going to that's local here, I begin doing a daily show on our Instagram TV. So on Instagram TV, we have a channel, Go Indie Now. You can, again, search Instagram.com/GoIndieNow. We have our own Instagram TV channel, and we'll be doing daily updates, like little news snippets here and there. It'll be 2 to 5 minutes long. We'll be celebrating new releases. We'll be celebrating, the places you can go to get information. Everything about what we've been doing in our weekly show, we'll be doing in our daily show. And so that'll happen in the middle of August, and then that'll be every day. Every Monday through Friday, I should say, not Saturday. Maybe on a Saturday, Sunday, I might pop up, but you can definitely depend on us every Monday through Friday. And then on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/GoIndieNow, we do our weekly show, which is called This Week in Indies. And that show is actually getting a format change where we're going to make it more like a Meet the Press kind of show, where we sit down and we have 4 or 5 indies and we discuss the like we're doing here, kind of the subjects of the day. You know, what this week we had this happen. So what do you feel about that? And we'll have 4 or 5 indies discussing that, and we'll do it that way. And we'll have great segments still that we'll continue to have. Like we have this great segment done by CL Cannon called The Indie Connection, and she'll continue to be on that and do that on that show. And we just got more and more shows coming out and things that we're working on to put out there. But ultimately, you can find us at GoIndieNow.com. That has every. That's kind of. I put some effort into the website, I should say, but it really is a placeholder for where you can go and find us elsewhere. But you can find us on YouTube through that. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram through GoIndieNow.com. And it's very easy to navigate and find us there and see what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that's what we're doing. So that's us in a nutshell.
That is so cool. By the way, I love the Indie Connection. I think that's a neat feature. I saw, like, you know,
Me
the
too.
first one right after it came out, and I'm like, yes, this is what we should be doing. Yes. That's for those who don't know, it's a segment where they say, okay, if you liked this book by this traditionally published well-known author, then you might like these books by these independents that are out there, right? And you know, it's good stuff if you're looking for a place to start with where to read independent authors. I think
Courtney does a great job with that segment. That's her segment. She's the one who created it. She came to me with the idea, and so I'm really happy to put it out there and present it to everybody because it's a really good idea. And it's really, it's one of those that's really awesome. And she also does a segment on our flagship show where she breaks down a marketing tip. Our flagship show is really amazing because it has everything that you would want. So you got interviews with indies, and then you have new releases where we have authors reading, and we have trailers from new movies that are out. We have marketing segment. We have a coach. We have a life coach who joins us, Christina Rienzi, every month now. She does a segment that's geared toward living your life as an artist, and then we have review segments of movies and audiobooks and all that out there too. And we feature a short film from a filmmaker in every episode that we put out. So, or at least try to. And so we're putting out art just as much as we are celebrating it. So
that's so cool. Courtney CL Cannon will also be featured on one of these interviews. I believe that one is scheduled for August 4th, but it will be in the updates. If you click on the Kickstarter live thingy on the side, it will show you what I have coming up. And of course, all featured on my YouTube channel a couple of days later. On the YouTube channel, I will have a link to Joe's channel because it's awesome. You should definitely check it out. But like he said, just type Go Indie Now in Google and you will find it. As long as you type it all one word, or even if you don't, it's probably the first thing that comes up. He's got good presence, so he knows his stuff about marketing, guys. So, and where do we find the book that started it all? I want to get your book.
It's called
Joe.
Amongst the Killing, and it's a crime thriller, and it's on Amazon. I have it as an audiobook. I have it as an ebook. I have it as a paperback. You go to Amazon, search Amongst the Killing, Joe Compton. It'll be there. I hate those stupid Amazon links because they're like 7 miles long. But
I know, right?
But yeah, it's called Amongst the Killing.
Yeah, much easier to type in Joe Compton Amazon, right? And then go to your page and find it there, right? Because you, of course, have an Author Central page, don't you?
Yes, and I have it in every country too. So wherever you're at, if you're watching this from Japan, you can find me. But yeah, so my book's a crime thriller. It's a duality story. It's a detective and a mass murderer telling their story one chapter at a time, and each tells a different chapter. So the first chapter is told by the detective, and then the second chapter by the mass murderer, and they go through the entire story of their story through that. And it's so that's the crime thriller, and I have a sequel which is called We the Moral Majority, coming out later this year. So
that is fantastic. Crime thrillers are kind of my guilty pleasure. I read them a lot. So I was a big fan of Michael Slade. He, they rather, because it's 3 people, right, do that same style of storytelling. I really enjoy it. So that's totally my thing. I am definitely going to pick up a copy, at least on Kindle. Nice. I'm going to do it because that's great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe Compton, for being on our show today. And please support GoIndieNow and his channel. And please support Once Upon a Time in the Wyrd West.
Yeah, go donate.
Thank you all so
some
much
really
for
cool. There's some really cool things that Diane's giving and for donating. Go donate because it's awesome. It's really cool. I think that's a really cool effort, and go out there and support her. Thank you, Diane, for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I hope we get a chance to
do it again
sometime.